What's up, everybody? Welcome to this live stream on the Pulse of the Draft. The Pulse of the Draft. I'm Dan. That's Bryce. I host Seahawks Forever. He hosts the Hawk Zone Rundown. This is our NFL Draft channel where we will focus on all draft all year, taking a look at draft prospects and team needs and draft fits all year long through the process. Still under construction, logo to be coming, intro to be coming, all that stuff. But who needs that stuff, right? Meat and potatoes. It's me and Bryce. We're going to talk combine today, right? What'd you think of the last 4 days?
I love the combine. It's really cool, especially when you get the access you get with guys like Brian Nimhauser and some of these guys that do unbelievable in-depth content to give us behind the scenes of what's going on and everything. It's also good to get a kind of feel for these guys, these players talking at the podium, answering questions. The on the field stuff, like the testing, it's good and it can help guys rise, but I like to see if what I see on the tape matches what they put together at the combine in a way and vice versa. Yeah. And so I think, again, with the combine, there's some things I'd still like to see fixed with it, but overall, I think it's one of the better events in the off season for sure.
I'm the same way, and I plan on going next year. For me, the combine is, as you said, either to confirm something that I've seen on tape, or I'm looking for new information, right? And I'll give you an example today. I wanted to see if a guy like Tyler Booker, I wanted to see his movement skills, right? Can he get to the second level? Can he pull? How does he do in the short pull and the long pull, and the wave drill and those bag drills on the field, to see if he's more scheme versatile than you would think just by watching the tape in what he did at Alabama, when really all they asked him to do was just maul guys, right? So I appreciate that. Sometimes you want to see something from a prospect and they don't show it to you, or sometimes you think a prospect has a certain athletic profile and then the testing disappoints you, right? We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about some winners and losers. Let's start with your list. Let's talk winners first, right? Try to keep it positive. Who are a couple of yours?
So one of mine, as you know, and everyone that watched Hawk Zone Rundown, I'm a quarterback guy. Jaxon Dart. I think he significantly increased his stock where he's now, everyone wants to talk about, okay, he's QB3. I think he's now pushing that QB2 conversation. And I think part of that is who one of my losers is. But I think Jaxon Dart did nothing but help himself when it came to the podium in his interviews. And then you watched him out on the field and just how effortlessly it takes him to throw that ball down the field. Like, he's so smooth. His arm is so live. He's definitely one of my winners. And the other ones I think that did, another guy I think that did really well for me is Landon Jackson, the D-end out of Arkansas, the edge out of Arkansas. Yeah. Significantly well with his testing. I think he's risen from where he may have been a late day 2 guy to more of a early day 2 guy now. And I think his testing really opened up some eyes for some people with how well he was able to do. So that's 2 of my guys for me, Dan.
Yeah, Jackson was interesting. I think the stat is that of players that are 260 pounds plus, vertical jump 40 inches, and then I can't remember the exact number of the broad jump, but a certain broad jump distance as well. Only 4 guys have ever done that in combine history. Him, Shamar Stewart this year from Texas A&M, and then Mario Williams and Myles Garrett. Not a bad group to be involved in. And then, yeah, Jaxon Dart, to me, his combine sort of mirrored what his Senior Bowl week was like for me, where he just, and you mentioned the word, he just made it look effortless. Like, it looks like it's so natural and comes so easy to him that he sort of flew under the radar. He was just so good yesterday that nobody talked about him. They talked about all these other guys. And I think that kind of speaks to just how comfortable his skill set is, and how easy, not easy, take that word back, but how ready he is for the next step, I think. Okay, I'll give you my 2 then, and we'll kind of go. I've got 5 here, and then I've got a whole list of guys that almost made my list, right? Jalen Knoll, I thought, was outstanding in a really good day for the wide receivers. Like, a ton of those guys ran sub 4.4s and sub 4.3s. Usually you get, and this we're going to talk about this when we get to the losers. It was kind of hard for me to come up with a loser list, because usually there's guys at every combine that are just, you wonder how they got invited because they're so bad at the testing. I think across the board this year, very, very few guys had those types of performances. But Noel, he's kind of known and thought of as sort of a slot merchant. I'm not so sure. He's not the biggest guy in the world, right? He's sub 6 foot, but he's put together well. He's really kind of short and stocky, but muscular, runs a 4.39 40, a 1.51 10-yard split. But then it was his jumps that blew me away. 41.5-inch vertical, 11.2 broad jump. And then, as you would expect from a guy built like he is, outstanding in the short shuttle and 3-cone. And then he went out and bench pressed 225 pounds 23 times. There's a kind of a sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? When it comes to slot guys, there's sort of a makeup that most people expect them to have, and they're usually a little bit smaller and they're not very strong. Guys like Tez Johnson, who we'll probably talk about when we get to my next list. But this is a guy that looks like he can go over the middle, catch a football, and take the punishment, but also do some cool things for you out of the backfield as well. And then the gauntlet, everything else, like real natural hands catcher. Love his releases from the line of scrimmage. I thought he had maybe as good a combine as any of the receivers. And then I'll throw another quarterback since you did. I thought Quinn Ewers really helped himself. Of all the quarterbacks coming into this, with maybe the exception of Will Howard, because we didn't see him at the Senior Bowl, same with Quinn Ewers. But with Ewers, it was because of some injury issues, needed to get healthy. We weren't sure if we were going to see him test and do everything at the combine. We found out the day before that he would. And then I thought he went out there and looked not only healthy, but I thought physically his frame, supposedly added some good muscle weight. I thought he looked the part. And then sort of in the same vein of what we just discussed with Jaxon Dart, he's just such a natural thrower. And he's been doing this at a high level from such a young age. He was starting as an 18-year-old at Texas. He's still just 21 years old with 38, 39 starts under his belt. He's been doing this his whole life, and it looked like it. I thought he really helped himself today. If there was anyone concerned about the accuracy issues, he was one of the most accurate guys out there to every level.
Yeah, no, Quinn Ewers definitely helped himself. And, Jalen Noel, I was really impressed. I've been really focused on Jaden Higgins, his running mate from Iowa State, who, again, he helped himself, I think, or more or less solidified how good he is. Both those receivers, I think, are going to be, if not in potentially late round 1, definitely round 2 kind of receivers. Another guy for me that I think definitely didn't maybe jump. Well, he did jump off the page quite literally, but the safety out of South Carolina, Nick Anamawori, he game changer. He's going to be, he ran the 4.38, he jumped 43 inches vertically, his broad jump, he's 6'3", 220. It is crazy as it is. He is a more athletic Cam Chancellor, basically, is what he is. And I think he's probably now pushed himself into being a top 20 pick. He was probably going to go in, round 1, early round 2, I think, initially when we first started looking at things. But after this, what you see on tape, the fact that he's played against good competition his entire collegiate career, you're going to see a guy that if someone takes him in the top 20, I wouldn't be shocked, and you're going to get a game-changing type player.
Up until this point, Malachi Starks was generally regarded safety number 1. And in a lot of mock drafts, you'll see him, at least until recently, mocked in the top 10. He had a good combine. He looked good, but was Anamawori so good that you think he jumped ahead of him?
That's interesting because I think they're very different players in some aspects. I think there's things that Anamawori does better than Starks, and I think there's things Starks might do. Starks, to me, when you watch him run, it doesn't even look like he's hitting the ground. He glides. He's so smooth in what he does in his transitions.
I'm not saying yesterday there was one reporter who was close to him during one of the drills, and he said he couldn't even hear his feet hit the turf.
And those are the type of things. I think it goes to in some respects, I think it's like talking about Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed. They're both elite. They're both top safeties of their era, but they both had different skill sets that made them unique. And I think in the case of these two players, in Starks and Anamawori, you're running into a similar thing. I'm not calling them Hall of Famers, so don't anyone take it that way. But they're both elite players, I think, and have the capability to be very good players. They just have some different skill sets. I think Anamawori can be a better support in the run, maybe than Starks can, but I think Starks on the back end is going to be more of that middle field guy that can take plays away from people because he just closes so fast.
Yeah, you're probably not asking Anamawori to play to play, deep safety.
Exactly.
You want him closer to the line of scrimmage. Yeah. Another name or two that you got as being winners coming away from the combine a little bit better off than they entered it.
Winners for me. So I think Jihad Campbell actually really helped himself. I think he, again, people were thinking maybe he's day 2, second round for sure. I think he's now pushed himself potentially into round 1, running a 4.52 40. And the thing he did too that surprised me was his coverage drops in the drills and his transitions with his hips were a lot better than I initially thought they were going to be. I think, he's the type of guy where, for me, his speed that I saw at the combine matched what I saw on the film from Alabama. Like, there was no, the way he moves at the combine without the pads on is different. No, it looked almost the exact same, which to me is, if you're getting that guy, he's going to be a plug and play starter, I think, day 1 for a team.
I'm going to go with another running back here, and I found these numbers that I had compiled earlier. So the running backs, third, and the guys on NFL Network said that fastest overall group of running backs ever at the combine since they've been covering it, going back 22 years. But 13 of them ran 4.48 or better. 3 of them were in the 4.3s, and most of these guys are at 220. This isn't a small running back class, so that was really remarkable. And then the wide receivers, 25 of them ran 4.48 or better. 10 of them ran in the 4.3s. Unbelievable. If you're looking for speed on offense this year, this is the year to do it. So I'll throw another running back at you, because I think there were so many bigger names, and now there's a lot of talk, and this happens every year. Guys get propped up, call it draft fatigue, or just call it, guys get tired of chalk, right? They get tired of mocking the same thing and seeing the same rankings. So I saw some stuff today that Omario Hampton has overtaken Ashton Genty as running back 1. I'm not buying that, but there were some big name guys at the top of this group. But to me, the guy that just kept catching my eye and kept blowing me away was Bashul Tootin out of Virginia Tech, 5'9", 206, really compact. Liked him at the Senior Bowl, loved him after yesterday. 4.32 in the 40, 1.49 10-yard split, 40.5-inch vertical, 10-10 broad jump, 4.41 20-yard shuttle. This guy is explosive, and when you turn on the tape, he's elusive too. Someone's going to get a great value if this guy slides down because of how many good backs there are early.
No, for sure. And one running back I'm going to add to that is Quinshawn Judkins out of Ohio State. Like, he, I think, did well to help himself this weekend. I think he definitely cemented himself as a high day 2 pick. I'd say somewhere between 40 and 60. He's going to be appealing to teams, I think, that are more centered on a gap or power run scheme. So you think about like the Philadelphia Eagles, he'd be a great second punch to a Saquon Barkley. If they wanted to, get some help in behind Saquon for another run, that's the type of running back I think they get. He ran a 4.51. He's 220 pounds. Like, he's not a small running back. So right. I think he's going to be an interesting guy. Another one for me that I think actually really helped himself was Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU.
Yeah, he was
like,
good.
He skipped the testing part, but like, he aced the gauntlet drill. He was running it over almost 19 miles per hour. And then he did the sled workout. He showed soft hands. The one thing that I was very interested with Mason Taylor, because you see his size, you see, he's 6'5", 245. And I'm thinking, okay, he can block. Can he anchor? Yeah, he showed he can do those things. But his deep ball tracking was flawless. Like, it was so smooth. He's definitely going to be a guy that I think is going to, enter the tight end 1-2 talk for a team. And he's going to be a top 50 pick, I think.
Yeah, I think Daniel Jeremiah referred to his gauntlet session as teaching tape today. He
was like down, on a line. He didn't move.
That line. Yep. He was the tracker was his friend. Another one of my winners, I thought of that cornerback group. I thought Maxwell Hairston of Kentucky just built on what he did at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was really outstanding, clocking a 4.28 in the 40. Now, some teams might have him as more of an inside guy because the arm length really isn't there, but such an explosive athlete, 40-inch vertical. And then we see the ball skills and the coverage ability on tape, but now knowing that he has that kind of long speed, I don't know if any of us thought that we're down in Mobile. But I thought anytime you can build upon and start stacking performances and solid performances, you're helping yourself on draft day. And I think he did that.
Yeah, so for me, for a cornerback, I'll give you a cornerback and a running back for me. Robert Longerbeam out of Rutgers ran a 4.39. His backpedal, though, watching him do it was so smooth. Like, it's elite level backpedaling. Which, when you think of some of these teams and the zone coverages that teams now run, just watching how he maneuvers, how his hips move, you're going to get I think he's a little underrated, just because he only had 4 interceptions in 2024, but he tested. When you watched him do his testing, he tested like a guy that's going to be a pick 70 to 100 type guy. I think he's day 3, day 2 cusp kind of guy, but I think he's going to be a steal for someone that gets him, where you're going to get a higher performing third corner than you would at that point in the draft if you take a Robert Longerbeam. For me at running back, a guy that really stood out, I've got Damian Martinez. That's who I want to talk about, because he to me
lighter. Yeah, he dropped some weight.
He came in lighter. That was the thing that surprised me a bunch, was how much lighter he came in, but it didn't look like he lost any power in his movement. You could still see the explosion. And that was one thing for me when I was worried about, when I saw, wow, he actually came in, at least 10 pounds lighter than I initially thought he would. But to still see the quick twitch, to still see the explosion, to still see the fact he could be a power back for you. He's one of my draft crushes. I liked him when he was at Oregon State. And, seeing what he did down in Miami and now seeing him being able to translate it to this NFL level, I think he'd be an interesting guy.
Yeah, I'm with you. When I saw he was 217, I thought, wait a minute, that's not the kind of player that I think he is. That's not the reason I've liked him. Shoot, he was listed at 240 at times during his season at Miami. So, but I'm right there with you. I thought in this case, sometimes it's not always great for these guys to cut weight. A lot of the defensive linemen do it just because they want that quicker 40, and then you can kind of see it show up in other areas in a negative way. And I don't think I saw that at all with Martinez. I think that works for him. I'll go back to the tight end group. I was really intrigued to see that group work out yesterday because, this class has been lauded for a long time. In fact, one analyst called it the best since 2010. I thought as a group, sort of the bulk of the group, when you take away the top guys, and Loveland and Warren didn't work out, were kind of underwhelming overall, with one exception. I thought Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon really stood out, which surprised me because I don't think he did in Mobile. He was good, he was solid, but he didn't really do anything dynamic while he was down there. But geez, I missed it, or he just didn't get the opportunity. Or he was overshadowed down there because Taylor and Arroyo had such good weeks. 6'5", 247, looks the part, has a reputation as a guy that can block and can play in line, but he ends up running a 4.6 340 with a 1.55 split and a 39-inch vertical. I didn't know he was that kind of athlete, and to me that changes his profile.
No, I agree. Terrence Ferguson is actually on my list too for tight ends that I think did a lot to help themselves and is a winner after this combine. I think he proved in more cases that he can be a starting tight end than a, rotational 2 to somebody else being the 1. That was my thing coming out of Mobile. I went, okay, I think he's more of a complementary piece to a better tight end on your roster potentially. Now I look at Terrence Ferguson and I go, hey, gets into the league. He's able to put on a little bit more, adult muscle in some respects for himself. I think he can be a tight end 1 for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what AJ Barner accomplished in Seattle last year as a guy who wasn't, thought of as a very dynamic athlete, and I think, and how productive he was. And I think Ferguson's much more athletic. And then it made me go back and look at the production at Oregon. And you look at, he had some pretty good quarterbacks thrown to him the last 3 years, but 32 catches, 42 catches, 43 catches, 14 touchdowns over the last 3 years. A 53-yarder, a 62-yarder. He's had some explosive plays in the pass game. I think of all those guys in that tight end group, he really kind of pushed himself up there. And then I'm going to give a honorable mention winner to Gunnar Helm, and almost had him in my loser list. And I don't know if you saw this, but he was so bad in the 40. I thought, wait a minute, that's not the player that I've seen on tape. Coming into this, I thought he was one of the best, maybe the best, outside of Tyler Warren, two-way tight end, guy that could really give it to you in the blocking game, and then took another step this last year as a receiver. Steve Sarkisian talked about that yesterday when he was in the booth with DJ and Eisen. But he just looked really clunky, really unathletic, lumbered through the 40s. And then the ankle, you mentioned it. He stumbled coming out of one of his starts. It didn't look like anything when we were watching it live, but severely sprained his ankle, lower ankle sprain. He says he'll be ready to go by his pro day, but we saw the pictures today. And just the fact that he gutted out the rest of that workout and actually looked okay and running some of the routes and catching the football, I thought, okay, he actually goes into the winner column, because those teams that really value grit, toughness, right? I mean, that's a guy that's going to score some points.
No, and that was the thing for me. When I saw him, I was like, this is not the guy that I anticipated seeing. And then when I saw what his ankle looked like after, I got a whole different appreciation for level of toughness. Like, that is a bad ankle sprain. That is not something like, oh, I just tweaked it, I'll be fine. That's like, if he were to have to play, we're talking about severe spatting of his ankle just to get him on the field. So I definitely was impressed with that for him. But do you want to get into our guys that are quote unquote losers out of this combine, Dan?
Yeah, let's, because I've got, like I said, kind of some honorable mention, but I'm sure when we get to the questions and comments, we'll have an opportunity to kind of get into some of that. Well, you already let the cat out of the bag. You already mentioned Shedeur. I didn't think he's on my loser list too. And I didn't think him not throwing at the combine was going to be a big deal, but what it did is it presented an opportunity for other guys, and those guys took it and ran with it. Jaxon Dart, you mentioned the throwing session. Quinn Ewers, how well I liked his throwing session. Both those guys also reportedly absolutely aced their interviews and really, really impressed coaches and GMs. And we haven't heard that about Sanders. We've heard that his interviews have gone well, but we're not hearing that kind of buzz that he's knocking it out of the park. I think he missed an opportunity to get out there and compete.
I really think he did too. The other thing for me that I was, listening to Shedeur talk, he was one of my guys on my losers list. Listening to him talk at his interview and saying like, oh, well, I went to Jackson State and changed that. I go to Colorado and changed that program, and I'm going to be a franchise changer. And that was a direct quote from him. And I kind of went back and I went, yeah, to an extent, but not to an extent where I look at you and go franchise quarterback. Like, I don't look at you in the same light that I look at like, hey, when Cincinnati took Joe Burrow, that was a franchise changing move for them going forward, or Buffalo with Josh Allen. I looked at Shedeur and I kind of went, you're being awfully egotistical and arrogant for a guy that doesn't check a lot of boxes physically.
Yeah.
And that's the thing when you look, if you're going to have that ego, you better be able to back it up. You didn't throw. And I think maybe in his mind, it's probably a good thing he didn't, because I think he would have struggled to go out there and throw with, the Jaxon Darts, the Tyler Shucks, and some of these guys that, like you said earlier, are so natural in their throwing and, effortless in it, that I think you would have seen some of Shedeur's gaps in his game. So for me, I think this is where, like I said earlier, I think Jaxon Dart has now gone from he's solidly QB3 to now I'm pushing to be QB2 and jumping Shedeur Sanders in the round one.
Yeah, there's some speculation that maybe one of the reasons he decided not to throw is when he saw that he got stuck in the group with Tyler Shuck, and that's a tough guy to follow for sure. We didn't talk about him in either of our winners list, but he had as good a day as anyone yesterday as well.
Yes.
All right, my next guy, James Pierce. So I know he tested well and he ran out of the gym and all that kind of stuff, and people are excited by that. And that's it's feeding time for the cats. That's that sound you hear in the background. But I just can't get over the fact that his arms are smaller than mine. Like his upper body, and I know if you look at PFF grades and there's some good reps on tape where he's okay in the run game, but I just don't see him standing up against NFL offensive tackles or guards, taking pullers on. Just that physique just really scares me. And then, and there'd been some whispers and rumors about attitude issues coming into the combine, and then coming out of it, there was one report that where a guy talked to a number of scouts and members of different teams organizations, and pretty overwhelmingly and consistently, nobody likes the personality, and that there was some anonymous sourcing out of the University of Tennessee that indicated that it was a big breath of fresh air when he's gone, that he's no longer around the program anymore, that he's that kind of negative type personality that just sucks the life out of a team. And that one front office member was quoted as saying that he wouldn't be surprised if he was still on the board on day 3, that he might fall that far. So, not a guy I'm touching.
No, he wouldn't be a guy I'd touch. I think he fits very, very well into the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's where I think he'll end up, is I think that's the type of team that will take the swing on him, right? The Philadelphia Eagles have that culture. They've proven they can take guys like that and make it work. I think that's where he goes. For me, I'm going to pivot.
Maybe even a place like it might work in New England, right? Because Vrabel's a dude that's like, he's just not going to put up with that stuff.
No, exactly. For me, a guy that I think hurt himself this weekend, I think, is Isaiah Bond out of Texas. Made the bold, statement, I'm going to break the 40-yard dash, then runs a 4.41.
Right.
And he even struggled in drills. He dropped quite a few passes. Just overall, I think, I think there was more discussion on him being a guy that was going to be an early day 2. And I think now he's on that cusp of day 2, day 3. And, his running mate, Marcus Golden, looked far and beyond way better than he did. And we talked about 2 other receivers.
4.29, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins that, again, performed better than Isaiah Bond did. So I think Isaiah Bond actually hurt his draft stock, and he's going to have a really good pro day to kind of gain back what he may have lost.
The rest of the guys on my losers list, like I said, it was hard to come up with names because there just weren't that many players at any position this year that just flunked the combine. And usually there are. But just guys that didn't test as explosively as I had hoped, and makes me want to go back to the tape and question some things. Sebastian Castro, a safety that I really like out of Iowa, that showed some really good instincts in Mobile and had the frame that could hold up in the box. Just, I thought across the board tested really poorly. And he's another one of those guys that's kind of older in age too. So, I think that kind of hurts any momentum he might have had. I thought Tez Johnson, weighing 154 pounds and only running a 4.5 in the 40. I mean, I know that's not his game. It's the short area stuff, and his 3-cone and his short shuttle were fine, but the frame already scared me. And the fact that, he doesn't have that kind of long speed, it's just another sort of negative check next to his name. And then sort of in that same category, I guess, where I thought the workouts were fine, but just not as explosive as I was hoping for or led to believe we were going to see. I thought Luther Burden had a little bit of a ho-hum combine, and while some other guys sort of eclipsed him. And Kobe Bryant was another one, strictly because like the ball skills are there. He looked fine in the coverage drills. But again, another guy that clocked 4.5 in the 40. And I'm just not sure, being that he's 174 pounds as an outside corner. So that's already a concern. And now he's running a 4.54. I don't know. That kind of took him down a notch for me. Fair or unfair, like I said, it was hard to find losers in this one.
So for me, one of the DNs that I thought hurt himself from where I thought he was going to be is Princely Umanalele from Ole Miss. I probably botched that name. I'll get better at that. But his 3-cone was really poor for his agility. I thought it was going to be better than that. He ran a 4.72. His drills from what I saw on tape to what I saw in the drills, he just lacked burst. And I don't know if he's going through a bit of a weight change and stuff like that. I just didn't see what I thought I was going to see for a guy that was an edge rusher that had 10 sacks in 2024. His speed just kind of disappointed me. I think he dropped. I honestly do, Dan. I think, I was thinking he may be a day 2 guy. I think he's more of a day 3 guy now, more looked at as a project than he is a, hey, we can come in and get him in a rotation earlier kind of guy.
Yeah.
So he was one for me. Another one that, I was kind of interested in to see what he was going to do, and I think hurt himself. Where is he here? Where is he? Oh, I can't find him now. He was on my notes. I can't find him. Just give me 1 second here.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, here it is. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. The reason why I think he hurt himself is he didn't do anything. He opted out of the drills and the testing. So there's no real new data. You know, I think Harmon gained some ground, honestly, in some respects. I just think now he's more of a day 2 pick, actually. I think he may have fallen a little bit where in some of the mocks I've been doing, I've seen him go in round 1. I think now, just because of that, he may have slid down to, you know, between 40 and 60 for his pick. His pro day will be the key thing. And this is where, when you sit back as a guy that's a fringe round 1 guy, like we've talked about, you know, on our other shows on the Hawks and Rundown and Seahawks Forever, when we've talked about guys that sit out of the combine and they don't take part in the drills or the testing, and you're not a solidified top 10 pick and like, you know, Cam Ward, for example, and you sit out as a guy that's more of a fringe first round pick, and these other guys do test and they start to gain ground on you, and now you start to slide without even doing anything. That's where this becomes you should test sometimes if you're not guaranteed that first round.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. The day before, I think it was Saturday, Shane Steichen was in the booth with those guys, and they asked him that exact question, like, how do you feel? How do you evaluate players that decide not to run or test or do anything at the combine? And most GMs I've heard ask that question give the gracious answer, right? John Schneider was asked that the other day, and he said, well, it depends on the guy, and you have to trust the rest of your evaluation. Steichen just said, no, I hate it. I hate it. I want guys that can compete, and it matters. You know, I want to see that they want to go out there and light it up, because you'll see a guy like Gunnar Helm who will do what he does, or Brandon Jackson today, who kind of came up lame during one drill. And they were talking about it in the booth. They're like, oh, he clearly, you can see him grimacing. He's not 100%. And then they showed him getting his hamstring wrapped. And I thought, well, that's a day for him. And he went right back out there and finished the rest of the testing. Like, to me, that matters.
No, it absolutely does. And that's where, again, this whole process, I think guys really need to start studying, but when they're coming up to their draft year, study what guys that are in the similar situation to them have done in the past, and use that as a way of, you know, you talk about teams and players studying their opponents. Study what has happened to guys that are similarly built to you, that have performed similarly to you in your college career, and what has happened when they've sat out of the combine versus when they've participated in certain parts. If you don't want to test and run the 40 and stuff, I get it, but still do the drills. The drills still show something and show a level of compete. If you want to wait until, because you're in the process of changing your weight for a certain position or whatever, and you're not comfortable yet running, I totally understand that. And I get that, but don't give up on doing the drill aspect of it. And I think that's where some of these guys hurt themselves. But when I look at it, you know, in the whole thing, I think my 3 guys I think help themselves the most is Emin Wari. Shamar Stewart, I think, helped himself actually quite a bit in this process. And I also think Hampton, the running back out of UNC, really helped himself, because I think he's now put himself into that RB2 conversation behind Genty.
A couple other guys that I thought really helped themselves. Ty Robinson out of Nebraska, who was a guy that just kept impressing me down in Mobile too. I thought he tested way better than I expected him to, and might have gotten himself into that day too, because he's a guy that can play all up and down the line. He can play end. He can reduce down inside. I thought Fadil Diggs out of Syracuse showed a ton of athleticism as a real twitchy edge guy, and someone worth taking a second look at. Danny Stutzman out of Oklahoma, who's one of the bigger inside linebackers in this class. And so I just assumed he wouldn't be very athletic, tested really, really well. And then there's always, every year there's a guy that I'd never heard of that flashes and makes me want to go watch a bunch more tape. And Deonta Thornton Jr., receiver, Tennessee, 6'5", averaged 25 yards per catch last year at Tennessee, and just tested out of the gym, ran a 4.3, which at that height, I believe the only other 6'5" or better receiver that's run a 4.3 in combine history was Calvin Johnson. Not bad company to keep. But then he backed it up. I thought he had a really great gauntlet drill where he showed good body control and huge, strong hands and caught the ball really well. So that's a guy that just kind of came out of nowhere for me and blew me away with this testing. And then I've got one more name here too. I thought Jared Wilson out of Georgia really solidified himself. We didn't get to see him down in Mobile, but I thought he really solidified himself as the number one center in this class. He's got the best size at the position. He's 6'3", 310, but yet he ran a 4.84, and he's got over 32-inch arms, which a lot of the other guys in that center class have shorter arms. So I thought he really shot himself up as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, one guy I'll add that I think really helped himself today in the lineman portion of it was Tate Ratledge. I think he did a phenomenal job today and really showed that, yes, he may not possess certain size qualifications, but he shows that ability to move to anchor to, and especially if a team's a zone blocking based team, I think he's going to be a perfect fit in there at the guard spot.
Football Talk with Bo says Dart was the most consistent quarterback for sure. Bo is a guy that has a show, and I met him down in Mobile, and he's going to be on Seahawks Forever later this week. Really looking forward to chopping it up with him about ball. Yeah, and that's saying something that Dart was the most consistent, because I thought there was one quarterback that got off to a really, really bad start. Let's talk about the quarterbacks a little bit, because then we're going to talk about our best fits, what we think are the best fits. So it's a good time to talk about the group as a whole. Will Howard got off to a rough start. Had a couple of really bad misses, especially throwing to his left, a couple out routes that he airmailed. And then when they ran the first set of in-breaking routes, he wasn't even close. And somebody put those together, put it out on Twitter today, and made it look really bad. I thought he got a lot better and finished strong. So I want to get your thoughts on that, because you mentioned to me before we went live that you thought he had a rough day.
Yeah, Will Howard to me did have a rough day. From what we saw in that college football playoff and how accurate he was and the throws that we made, again, for me, a lot of this is tying tape. And the one thing I'll say on top that bugs me about the NFL Combine is I want to, the thing, and this, the average fan probably doesn't understand this, but when we're talking about quarterbacks coming into the NFL game, and there's the under center aspect now in the NFL, where college is very much more shotgun based, the NFL, you still have to get under center, drop back, and make throws. That interchange and that exchange between the center to quarterback takes some of the rhythm into account for the quarterback making these outbreaker throws, these inbreaker, these timing route throws. I want to see the center there. You can't tell me you can't convince a guy, at least, or coach, to go down on one knee, put a hand there, and give the actual snap to the quarterback, because it actually simulates what it's going to be like for them to throw that route, to get back from being underneath the center and drop into your rhythm of your drop and throw the ball. So that's just one thing that bugs me as a quarterback coach and a quarterback from the past myself. I want to see that implemented in the combine. But for Will Howard, he missed some throws badly. And we're not talking like a slight miss. We're talking like overshot, way behind, way in front.
Yeah.
And they're routine throws. It's not like we're talking, hey, he missed because they're rolling him out to his bad side and he missed throwing the dropout at 18 yards. We're talking he missed the 10-yard dig route. That's like a staple in most NFL offenses. I think Will Howard's pro day is going to have to be almost perfect for him to make up some of the ground he might have lost in this. I think he now firmly puts himself down below a few other quarterbacks for me on my list from this, because this is shorts and a t-shirt. You shouldn't miss as a quarterback in this. This isn't like there's pressure on you. Yes, there is, but there's not a physical rush coming at you. You should be able to make some of these throws. So when I see quarterbacks missing routine throws on air, I start to wonder, okay, how is that going to be once you get more pressure in your face and you're facing more complicated defenses in the NFL and more, complex even concepts on offense? How are you going to be able to stay in rhythm and make those throws? So for me, Will Howard really did struggle today, or, when he threw, and it yesterday. And I think it's something that, teams are going to be wary of.
Now, I really want to get your thoughts on this as a quarterbacks coach, because I thought it was pretty clear today that, and I heard one analyst refer to it as he's been in the lab. Pretty clear to me that Jalen Milroe's done some pretty good work between Mobile and the combine. I thought there's still work to be done. There's still a lot of work to be done. But mechanically, I thought he was better. I thought his lower half was married more to his torso, that he was more in sync. And I think it showed up. He wasn't pristine in his accuracy, but when he was missing, they weren't Will Howard bad on the misses. They were still catchable. They were there for the receiver to make a play on it. I thought Milroe took a step forward.
I would agree with you. For me, the interesting thing was his size hand change from Senior Bowl to the combine. That's a significant jump. That's not a little bit. Right. That's quite a bit. So I wonder if something got missed there at Senior Bowl or either the scouting combine. Someone's got to figure out how to use a tape measure.
Well, they don't know how to measure arms either, because all of the offensive linemen showed up to Indianapolis with shorter arms than they had in Mobile. So something was amiss there. Yeah,
something was amiss. For me, with his throwing today, like, he threw a beautiful 60-yard deep ball with touch.
Yeah,
he did miss high and low in some, but what I noticed was he improved mid-session, which was interesting. Like, for a quarterback to improve when he's in the midst of doing these throws and stuff shows a level of real-time learning for them to be able to go, hey, this is what I'm mechanically doing wrong. This is what my QB coach has been on me about. I can feel it, I can adjust, and then I can correct it. He's going to need a quarterback coach and to sit for a year or two. Like, he's going to need the Jordan Love treatment, I think, in some respects. But what I will say is I think he has moved from being a late day 2, maybe even day 3 pick, early day 3, to now being, in my opinion, like, we're talking firmly round 2, early round 3 guy. Like, I think some team's going to take the risk and go, hey, he's shown some upside. He's showing improvement even through this process. And the athletic ability of him is off the charts. We've already discussed that. Like, his athletic ability to run, I think he now becomes a more interesting prospect potentially for some teams.
I think the best line of the whole combine was Daniel Jeremiah said, if I'm Jalen Milroe, I'm never wearing a shirt with sleeves.
No,
like, the guy's just jacked. Right?
He's ripped. Yeah.
Before we get into our kind of favorite quarterback fits, just want to shout out to everybody who's in here checking out the new channel, still under construction, right? We'll kind of build some of this out as we go forward, but we've got 736 of you in here right now on this live stream, which is outstanding. And the vast majority of those are from your Twitter handle, Bryce. So shout out to all of your Twitter followers. Be sure to give the channel a subscription, help us grow moving forward, and we'll keep bringing you the best draft content that we can. Let's do this. Let's talk about our quarterback fits, and then we'll get into some comments and questions. So we divided up 5 each, right? So we're not going to get to all of them. Sorry, Brady Cook. But I gave you Cam Ward, Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Tyler Shuck, and Seth Hannigan. Why don't you start off, and then we'll alternate. I'm going to take Shadur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Jaxon Dart, Riley Leonard, and Jalen Milroe. Cam Ward, is he going 1 overall to the Titans, or do you think there's a better fit?
I think he's going to, if the Titans stay there, I think he's going to be the pick for them. I think he'd be a better fit, honestly, for the Giants with what they've got potentially going on with I think in some respects, a better offensive mind, and Dayball, I think, could do more with Cam Ward. For me, the fits I've got, Tennessee, the New York Jets, I think, are a good fit. As crazy as it sounds, the Giants. And then one team, if somehow he fell, I think would be, with his skill set, would be actually Seattle. If he, whatever reason, fell, I think that there's no question if he somehow got to 18, Seattle should take that pick and that gamble. But realistically, I think the Jets, Titans, and Giants are all going to be potential fits for him. I think the Raiders could be one too. He has a lot of things you want to see in your quarterback, right? He can move, he can make plays, outside the pocket. He's got such a smooth delivery and throwing motion. I do worry. I don't know if he's a day 1 plug and play starter, but where he's going to be drafted, that's going to be the expectation.
Yeah.
I think he's the type of guy that would benefit from having a year. I think all these quarterbacks are developmental guys. I don't think they're go out and start day 1 type of guys and have success like you saw with Jaden Daniels this year, even to the extent of guys that came in, like Bo Nix, Michael Penix later on in the year. Those guys had a lot of college starts underneath their belt in various systems. I think Cam Ward does have that, but I don't think he has it to the level the guys last year did. So Those are the fits I see for Cam Ward.
Thing I like about Ward, and obviously I got to watch a lot of him because I'm a Wazoo guy, right? But he's stepped up every time he's stepped up in competition. It's been a significant step up, but his performance has gone right with him. Like he went from incarnate Word to WSU, which at the time was in the Pac-12, and hit the ground running and produced. And then he went from there to Miami, and he produced under bigger, brighter lights, right? I expect him to do something similar, stepping up to the NFL. So Shedeur, we'll start at the top, kind of work our way down, right? So Shedeur, because of the things we've talked about, right? I looked at this more from a personality fit standpoint than I did a football fit, because a guy like him, that when he's at his best and he's seeing the field well, he's processing well, his pocket presence is really good, and he's maybe the most accurate quarterback, at least has the most accurate tape. And another guy that had stepped up level of competition, right? And was able to still perform. It's just, there's a lot to manage there, right? There's his dad, and there's everything going on off the field, and some of the stuff you touched on. And even though I feel like in his interviews, he speaks in a humble manner, there's an ego that has to be managed there. And I don't think there's anyone in the league that's better at managing egos than Pete Carroll, who's now with the Las Vegas Raiders. And now that, Stafford's staying in LA, does that put the Raiders, because we know that they were pursuing Stafford, does that put the Raiders in the Sam Darnold camp? If they do pursue a veteran quarterback, is a long-term deal, short-term deal? Or are they looking for someone else, someone younger? There's a lot of needs on that roster. So you could easily justify them going the veteran quarterback route, waiting, right, to invest in a franchise quarterback and addressing other needs. But if they chose to go Sanders at 6, I think Pete's a guy that can handle all that stuff. None of it would faze him.
No, I think Shedeur to the Raiders. And the other factor there, you talk about Pete, Tom Brady. Yeah. Tom Brady's the other big selling factor there. Shedeur and him have had a relationship for a few years.
Tom's going to let you know about it.
Exactly. And I think, that's where you look. And I think the Raiders, because of what he's done, I think he has. And you read a lot of these guys that are tapped in, the Tony Paulines, the different guys that are tapped into these teams. They've all kind of said Shedeur's, like, his whole process so far from Shrine Bowl to this has maybe made him slide a bit. I think there's a potential that he has slid into more of an attainable range for the Raiders, where before people didn't think he might get there. Now I think there's a real conversation that he will be available at 6, and I think the Raiders may go that direction.
Yeah. Kyle McCord, best fit for him.
So Kyle McCord for me is a little interesting, because I was a little disappointed in how he performed with his traits this weekend. I look at it and I go, he's not going to be an athletic whiz. That's not his thing. For me, I look at a couple situations. I think Dallas makes some sense because of Dak's uncertainty, and they don't really have a great backup plan there. I think he would fit Brian Schottenheimer's system. We've seen it here in Seattle, the deep shots down the field, CD Lamb, some of the weapons they have there. Another team for me, like for Kyle McCord, I don't know how many starter teams are going to be looking, like a guy that can play right away. Again, I think Tampa Bay is an interesting place. Like, they may need a successor eventually to Baker. Yes, they've given Baker money, but get a better backup in there behind Baker. I'd say the same for the Green Bay Packers. Really, they've got Malik Willis. I think, again, Green Bay's always been so good at that, and it's something we envy, is their ability to identify a quarterback, take a quarterback, develop him for a few years. Then when there comes a point where they got to make a decision, they make a decision. I also think, again, I'm going to throw this team in there. I think Seattle's another interesting thing because of his skill set. Kubiak's West Coast offense, if you look at West Coast teams, Minnesota, San Francisco, even the LA Rams, I'd throw the LA Rams as a McCord potential team. He fits what they do well. He likes to come off play action, stay in the pocket, be in rhythm, throw the intermediate routes. Those are the teams for Kyle McCord. And he interviewed well. From everything I've heard and read, he's interviewed quite well. But I do think he didn't wow at the combine to move himself up. I still think he's going to be a late day 2, day 3 guy.
Next up, I'll do Jaxon Dart. And to me, And as a fan of an opposing team in the NFC West, I don't want to see this, but I think it makes almost too much sense to be Sean McVay's next project. Yep. And what really brought this to light for me was the fact that not only did they agree with Matthew Stafford, he's going to stay put, but that, and we don't know the terms of the contract yet. Sounds like we might not until the start of free agency. But one report indicated that it'll be structured in such a way to acknowledge the fact that Matthew Stafford's going to go year to year for the rest of his career. And so if you're Sean McVay, like, I know he likes Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's not the future, right? Stetson Bennett certainly isn't the future. You have to get a guy in this quarterback class that you believe in that can be the next guy after Matthew Stafford. It might have to play sooner rather than later because we know about Stafford's injury history. And I just think Dart is a guy that's going to appeal to him with his makeup, everything, all the intangible stuff, but also just his style of play and his throwing ability. And I think it would give Sean McVay something that he hasn't had really. And that's a mobile quarterback that he can play around with and do some things in the running game too. So I just think that makes too much sense. And I could absolutely see the Rams being one of those teams that not only use their first round pick on him, but if they sense there's any risk of losing him, I could see them trying to bump up a little bit in the first round to get him.
I agree with you. I think that's a great fit for Dart. I think that's also a very scary fit for teams in the NFC West because right. I think that is the one thing McVay has never had is a guy that can actually, when he calls these boots, be a threat to run. It's like when all of a sudden, when we were all watching the draft and McVay got Cooper Kupp, we went of all the places for that receiver to fall, he falls to the guy that's this offensive whiz and is going to find a way to use him in different ways.
Yeah.
And we've seen what's happened. You look at Puka Nacua, falls to the Rams, and McVay finds a way to highlight and use his skill set in different ways. I think another place that I could see Dart ending up where he could be a factor is the Pittsburgh Steelers. If they aren't able to figure out who they're, if it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson or whatever they want to do, his demeanor from listening to him in interviews, he's kind of got a bit of a lunch pail attitude to him to an extent that I could see him potentially working in Pittsburgh because they always have good receivers. Yeah. They've got the ability, to play a certain way there, and that would, I think, allow him to fit in to the system. And then as he gets more comfortable in it, they can expand it to an extent and do some fun things with it.
All right, next up for you is Will Howard.
Right, Will Howard. So, again, he did struggle in the combine for me, but my number one fit for Will Howard, ironically, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's got a Pittsburgh Steeler mentality. Yeah, I think he would fit well in a run-heavy system to start to get him more comfortable to the NFL. Again, I think he's big like Big Ben. So I think he'll endear himself to the people of Pittsburgh very quickly. The other place for me with Will Howard that I think has now become more of a realistic fit is the Las Vegas Raiders with his OC Chip Kelly there. Right. If they weren't to land Shador, I think, again, he goes there. He's got Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll. We know how he works with rookie quarterbacks. And you have the GOAT, Tom Brady, there to help mentor this guy along. And I think Will Howard would be sitting in football heaven in some aspects with a Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, and Tom Brady to help cultivate that early part of his career.
Some of these guys, it's kind of hard to find fits for because they don't need a quarterback right away, right?
Exactly.
So you're looking for the right situation for them to be in to get the best development, to end up having the best chance to have a career, whether it's in that spot or somewhere else. And so with Milroe, I was really, really searching for a place that he'd make sense where he wouldn't have to even have the risk of having to play early on. And then it hit me. And it hit me because of the guy that's currently the backup there. And I think the Packers would be a perfect fit for Jalen Milroe. What Matt LaFleur was able to get out of Malik Willis when he had to play, I think he started 3-4 games when Jordan Love was hurt, and was absolutely maybe one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen. Like, to me, Malik Willis is not an NFL starter, but he played so well in those 3 or 4 games that all of a sudden you had fans from other teams going, we should trade for Malik Willis, right? No, don't touch him. It's just that it was a perfect situation of a team that had a good offensive line, gave him protection, had a bunch of receivers, had a solid running game, and a coach that knew exactly what he could and couldn't do with him. And I think if you put Milroe in that situation with a guy like LaFleur, let him develop him, no risk of having to play anytime early in his career, as long as Jordan Love stays healthy, then you're talking about Malik Willis on steroids. Like everything you think Malik Willis can be good at, Jalen Milroe can be better at. And so you're basically replacing your current backup with one that has way higher upside and is younger.
No, and I agree with you. I think that would be Malik Willis on steroids for them, would be having Jalen Milroe. And I think it would allow him to do some flexible things. You could start with his development, and that's the key thing that Green Bay does so well in that organization, is just develop quarterbacks. They develop them well. They've done it in the past. You bring in a guy with talent. You don't force him to play because you have Jordan Love, who currently is a top 15 NFL quarterback, and you put him in certain situations. You put him in special packages, and you let him do his thing. I absolutely love that fit for Jalen Milroe.
All right, next up for you is the guy that some people think stole the combine, Tyler Shough.
And I would agree with those individuals. And the more I've watched Tyler Shough, from his last game versus my Washington Huskies to watching him at the combine and to watching him at Senior Bowl when he was there, Tyler Shough, to me, if he was 3 years younger, would be up there in the conversation. I think higher up this, this group of draftable quarterbacks. For me, again, this is where, like you said, Dan, it's really hard to find fits for guys because you're looking for guys that we want to see grow and get better.
But he needs to play. Yeah,
he needs to play. He can't sit. Yeah. So, again, when I look at Tyler Shough, I'm looking at teams like the Raiders as a later round. They could take that guy. His skill set to me for Pete Carroll would be very reminiscent to what Geno's is. Taller guy, more athletic, can throw and make every throw on the field. I look at a team like, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I even look at a team like the Giants. The Seahawks could use Tyler Shough. The Jets. Like, there's no real perfect fit for him, I don't think. It's wherever he can get on the field the soonest due to his age and still be effective. And I think he needs to go to a place, though, that can run the ball well. That's one thing for Tyler Shough. I think he's got to go to a place where it's not, hey, come in and throw it 40 times. Hey, come in, just manage it, make the throws we ask you to make. Again, the Rams would be a really good fit for Tyler Shough. I think, again, that would give us all nightmares in the West Coast here. But those are kind of just, it's getting harder to find these guys' homes because, especially a guy like Tyler Shough, you're going, how do we get him on the field?
What about a place like, we haven't talked about this team yet. What about Minnesota? Because, there's still the question of maybe they tag Sam Darnold. I don't think that's happening, right? They love JJ McCarthy. They say his rehab's going well, but you don't know for certain that he's going to be ready. And there's a thought that maybe they'll use Daniel Jones, who was on the practice squad late last year, as kind of their bridge this year. But I just feel like Kevin O'Connell would look at a guy like Tyler Shough with that arm talent and go, okay, I can work with that. And he might need to play as a rookie.
Yeah, no, I think the Vikings are an interesting one. The other team I could think of too is the LA Chargers. Yes, they have Justin Herbert, but they need a guy that can be a good backup for Herbert. He tends to have some injuries and stuff, and I think he fits Jim Harbaugh's system so well in what they would ask him to do there with his size and his mobility. He could come in and play that, and I think that's what you'd get. And, Tyler Shough's career, unless he lands in the right spot, is going to be like, can you be a plus end backup quarterback for a team where they can come in and go, hey, if we lose our guy, it's okay. Tyler Shough's there. And that's how he eventually gets his NFL start. I don't know if he's going to land in the right place where he's going to be the guy that can really push the day one starter.
Yeah. I've got Riley Leonard up next. And he's a guy that just, I keep trying to count him out and dismiss him. And he keeps showing me something. I thought the knock on him is maybe the arm strength isn't there. That's not what I saw down in Mobile. Yeah. He was one of the most consistent guys that whole week. I thought we saw that yesterday, especially later in the workout. He was really accurate early, but then the deep stuff, he was one of the best quarterbacks there, I thought, at the deep ball throwing. And he's bigger than some people think. he is. He's 6'4.5". He's built really well. We know he's got the ability and the willingness to run the football. He's got that part of his game going for him. And then all of the off the field stuff, he's just off the charts as far as the intangibles. And so I was looking for a spot where if he had to play, he could play, but that he could develop into something more. And so I went with the Atlanta Falcons. Like, we love Michael Penix, right? But you just don't know until you know. And especially if they move on from Kirk Cousins, which I think at some point they will. I don't know that they want to pay out that bonus. You know, he's a guy that has a pretty significant injury history, even though he's been healthy for the last 3 years, but a couple of blown ACLs, rotator cuffs, some serious injuries that, you know, they've struggled for a long time to have some consistency there at the quarterback position and to have some depth there. And I just think that might be a place for him with Zach Robinson there and that McVay scheme. They've got a solid offensive line. I think they're going to add to that. I think that's a priority for them this offseason because, you know, it looks like they're probably going to lose Drew Dalman, but they've got the weapons. They got Bijan. They can run the football. That it just seems like a cool spot to me where if he had to play, you could win with them, but you also have a quarterback that is a little bit older and has an injury history.
Agreed. I think that would be a good spot. The other spot I could think of for Riley Leonard would be the Indianapolis Colts. They want to bring in competition for Anthony Richardson.
We talked about the Colts. Yeah.
Shane Steichen's there. They run a system that is used to having a guy that's mobile and can do things.
Yeah.
I think Riley Leonard could go there and really push Anthony Richardson because I think he's more of an accomplished quarterback right out of the gate. He may not have the booming arm, but I think he fits maybe what more of Shane Steichen would like to do. So I think the Colts could be an interesting spot.
I like that one. And then I gave you Seth Hannigan, just a guy that another guy I keep trying to count out. You know, he didn't impress me at all during the week of practices in the Senior Bowl. And then he went out and had the best game of anybody. And if the last touchdown pass hadn't have been to Jack Besh, I think Hannigan would have won MVP. And then while everybody else was talking about the other quarterbacks at the throwing session yesterday, he just kept throwing it where it's supposed to go.
Seth Hannigan, to me, I think is going to be a backup in the NFL. I think that's what his role is. I don't see him as a starter. Just watching his tape at Memphis, the level of competition, then moving to watching how he practices to play. Like, a lot of the time, how you practice, how you're going to play. But he seems to be a gamer type.
Yeah.
I've got a couple teams for him. I've got, I think, the New Orleans Saints. We don't know what their QB situation is going to be like.
Right.
I think he could be an interesting fit for a Kellen Moore. I've also got the Miami Dolphins. They're going to need a potential guy that can come in, and he has an arm. Like, he can push the ball to a Jalen Waddle, to a Tyreek Hill. He's a bit bigger. I think he can hold up more. You never know with Tua if he's going to get knocked on his head again and have a concussion, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then for backup positions for Seth Hannigan, I think where he could be more of a backup fit would be the Philadelphia Eagles and Houston Texans.
And then we finish up. I've got Quinn Ewers, and for me, it's Seattle all day long. You and I have talked about this, obviously, because we have Seattle channels. Yep. And I did a show on this recently. There's just so many connections that they're impossible to ignore, right? We know for a fact John Schneider's been aware of and in touch with Quinn Ewers going all the way back to his true freshman season at Ohio State when they were there. They were there scouting receivers. And then he goes to Texas. Schneider talked at the podium in Indianapolis earlier this week about how much connections matter to him, talking to former coaches that have coached a kid, former teammates, and what they thought of him. Well, at Ohio, they have Jackson Smith-Njigba, played for a year with Quinn Ewers. Byron Murphy played for 2 years at Texas with Quinn Ewers. Even Tyreek Smith on their practice squad played with him at Ohio State that freshman year. So they have those connections. And then when it came out leading up to the quarterback workouts in Indy, that Mike McCarthy is training Quinn Ewers as his private quarterback coach now. And, you know, McCarthy was a quarterback coach in Kansas City when Schneider was the director of pro personnel there in the late 90s. And then Schneider went to Green Bay and was Ted Thompson's right-hand man and helped hire Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. Like, the connections are so solid. Plus, I just think he's a guy that would fit that Kubiak system and would just has that kind of moxie and a little bit of an edge to him that I think Schneider is drawn to. And then reportedly, they had a really, really great interview with him as well at the combine. And so I think, and his age fits with the timeline, right? We're expecting the Seahawks to extend Geno Smith here sometime in the next couple of weeks. Let's say it's structured in a way that there's easy outs every year and they can move on from him after, say, 2026. He'll be 36 years of age at that point. Well, Quinn Ewers isn't even 22 yet. And so he would still be younger. If he waited 2 years for his starting spot, he would still be younger when he got that opportunity than Sam Howell is now, who's Geno Smith's current backup. So to me, that one just makes way too much sense. And with as much as the buzz around Ewers is kind of rising, I would anticipate that continuing. He'll probably have a great pro day with all those receivers he gets to throw to, and Jaden Blue and all his skill position guys down there. That if he's still there, it might take pick 50 to get him, because, we all thought of him as a third round or later pick. I think he might end up being a second round guy when all is said and done.
I think Ewers is going to have a very, I was jealous that you got to pick him for your list, because I was really impressed with him. I've been up and down on Ewers.
So have I. And
for me, the thing is I look at it and I go, okay, how does he translate? What does his game translate well to the NFL? And, we look at people who are saying, well, his deep ball accuracy isn't great, or he doesn't have necessarily the arm strength to whip it down the field 60, 70 yards. But then when I think of, okay, Ryan Grubb was our offensive coordinator in Seattle still, I would have gone, yeah, no, I don't think Quinn Ewers fits necessarily. This system, the West Coast, which again, Sarkisian's come out of from being with Pete Carroll and the different coaches he's gone under, he's fit to run those intermediate short timing routes better than most. And I think that's what you saw to a bit in his throwing session, was when it was those timing routes, he's very good. His ball comes out. It's a very catchable ball. It's got enough velocity. It's catchable. I think you're dead on. I honestly think there's more smoke going towards Ewers being potentially higher up Seattle's board than most people think. I think it's going to drive some Seattle fans nuts, because I think they see other quarterbacks as better fits.
Yeah.
But again, we got to think of this new offensive coordinator and what this whole front office and organization looks for, and it's always been connections. And when Mike McCarthy, I guarantee you, John Schneider has that number, and he will call Mike and he'll give him an honest opinion of where Quinn Ewers is and if he fits. And if he tells John, hey, look, this is a kid you're going to want, don't play him right away, but he's a kid you can develop and he's going to be special, John's going to go make that pick. And I could see that pick being either pick 82, because I think some teams in the NFL still are worried about his size and his durability.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. He's put on, I think, 5 pounds since finishing the college season, 5 or 10 pounds. He's gotten a bit bigger. It's going to be interesting to see how teams value that. But when I look at, I've always liked Quinn Ewers. I just have seen an up and down from him lately, and I want to see that consistency come back that he had earlier on. And when I do see that, when it does hit, it looks really pretty and it looks really good, and he can throw with the best of them. But I don't want to see Quinn Ewers be in a situation where he has to play right away. And I think Geno, to be honest, with the amount of stuff that Quinn's dealt with in the media, I think Geno would also be an ideal person for to mentor him as a young quarterback and how to deal with those things.
Yeah, I like that. All right, let's talk about some other positions. Get to the comments and questions. Dogzilla Monster, thank you for the donation. What is your interior offensive line order for zone scheme draft guys? Who were some of the guys you saw work out today that you thought looked the most mobile?
Tate Ratledge being one of them. Membu was another one for me that really impressed, and I think he's going to be a guy that's going to go relatively high in the draft.
He might be OT1 now.
I think there's a good chance he is. I think he's done himself a lot of favors.
But some teams will prefer him as a guard. He's got the arm length to play tackle, but it's just kind of a weird body for a tackle.
Yeah, it's interesting that way. Gray Zabel, I think, again, is an interesting guy, I think, for zone blocking. But the thing that worries me is level of competition he's played. How's he going to handle the NFL? The one for me that I'd love to see, and I just don't know if he fits it, and I struggle, and I'm trying to make him fit in a good zone blocking scheme, is Tyler Booker.
I thought he moved much better than I expected him to. When he ran the 40, I thought, nope, not a zone guy. But when he runs like the pole drills and the deep pole drills, I thought he got out and moved well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was impressed with some of them. Clay Webb's another one for me.
I was just going to say his name. Yeah. He's really athletic. And then if they would ever commit to moving him inside, which teams still seem reluctant to, they wouldn't in Mobile, but Marcus Bowe is another guy that just, he moves so well and he just doesn't have those prototypical tackle specs that I'd really like to see someone play him inside.
Yeah, no, I think for sure that's another guy. It's like Kelvin Banks is the one I'm surprised with the most, that it seems like he's fallen a bit. And I think he fits well into his own scheme. The other one too that I think is an interesting one will be Will Campbell.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like he ran a 4.98, which was some freakish speed at 319, but his stance is what worries me. That's the one thing for me where I look, if you kicked him inside to guard, is he going to be able to be fit in that role? Because I just don't see his stance working at the tackle position. But the way he moved and did things, I think people are going to still try him out as a tackle. But he's got such a fast, explosive first step. That was the one thing I saw in some of the drills, was like, for a man his size, he can move. Like, he can just take off and move.
Yeah. I'll throw you another name and this guy almost made my winners list. But I thought Joshua Gray from Oregon State was really, really athletic and natural. And he's a guy that a couple of years ago, he was being talked about almost as, Talisi Fuaga, who's now with the New Orleans Saints, was his teammate at Oregon State. And he was considered the better of the two, but they both played tackle in Fuaga's last year. And Gray was getting some day one or day two buzz too. And then he stayed in school. He ends up dropping some weight, moving inside, and they even he took some center reps today as well. He's barely 300 pounds now, but we've seen him play tackle in the Pac-12. We've seen him be able to be physical, but now to be able to move like that, I thought he was a guy that really surprised me and get out there too. So
I got one more for you, two actually. Jonah Savanaya, I think proved
sub-5.
I know, like. He definitely moves well. I think he's going to be a good guard in the NFL. 6'4", I don't think he's a tackle.
Yeah.
But he did really well. And my personal favorite lineman in this class is Donovan Jackson. And I loved watching Donovan Jackson move today. For a man his size, being, 320 plus pounds, he moves so well. His feet are so fast. To me, whoever takes him is hedging on two things. You're going to get, I think, a Pro Bowl or second level all pro type player at guard, but he can also bounce out if you ever struggle at a tackle spot and take over a tackle spot for you.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to take a Seahawk question here. Again, another reminder, this is not a Seahawk draft channel. This is an NFL draft channel. We're covering the whole league, but being as how we both have Seahawk shows, of course, a bunch of our viewers are going to be Seahawk fans as well. So Dreams asks your top 3 players for Seattle at 18. And for fun, give me your dream scenario if we have picks 18 and 23. We know what that's in reference to. Some of the reports over the last couple of days that the Green Bay Packers might be interested in DK Metcalf. Right now at 18, if you're the Seahawks, who are your top 3 picks?
Oh, that's a good one. I think Emin Wari is one now for sure at 18. Like, if he somehow fell to Seattle at 18, just the things I think Mike McDonald could do with him on defense, I would love to see him in the Seattle jersey. I think Tyler Booker's another one. If he somehow reaches 18, is another guy that you'd have to look at. And then I would probably go with, I'm thinking like I want to almost double down on interior line, and I'd probably have to go or line in general. I'd have to go with Membu. Like, any one of those 3, I would be extremely happy with if Seattle took.
Sure doesn't sound like Membu's going to get to 18 now after how much he's risen up. I'll do this. I'm going to stick to the list of reported interviews that the Seahawks had in Indianapolis. Well, no, I'm not going to stick to it because I think one of the 3 for me is Kenneth Grant. defensive tackle, Michigan.
Yeah.
He makes a ton of sense for me as a guy that his game would really complement Byron Murphy's next to him and allow them to move Murphy around and do some cool things with him. He wouldn't have to play as much nose. And Grant's a guy he's so strong, right? Bruce Feldman's freak list 2 years in a row. Couldn't do all the testing because he tweaked a hamstring, and he was really upset because he was anticipating blowing all the testing out of the water, even at 330 pounds. But also a guy that you see how raw he is, and you know that his best football is ahead of him. I think that would make a ton of sense. And then, yeah, you got to talk about offensive linemen when you talk about Seattle, and the list of offensive linemen they met with at the combine is long and prestigious, and it includes some guys that are not supposed to be there at 18, which makes you wonder. They interviewed Will Campbell, right? He's been mocked in the top 10 this entire process. They did talk to Gray Zabel. They did talk to Donovan Jackson. But at 18, man. See, I said I was going to make it easy, but I still think that even though he might not be an obvious scheme fit, if Tyler Booker makes it to 18, I think he's near the top of their draft board. I think he did move well enough today to show he could play in an outside zone. And when you talk about the intangible stuff that the Seahawks have always valued so much, he's been called the Will Campbell or the Will Anderson of the offensive line, that he was that kind of alpha dog and leader. And when he was asked what he loves about football at the combine, he said, making other guys I play against not love football anymore. So to me, that's a guy I'm taking all day long. And then if I'm going kind of outside the box, I think if one of those tight ends, I don't think Tyler Warren's getting to 18, but even with the shoulder injury, I think if he's fully healthy, Colson Loveland is a guy that's going in the top 15 and is a game-changing type receiving tight end. And when Clint Kubiak comes in and all the 12 and 13 personnel he likes to run, and in Seattle, outside of DK and JSN, you don't have a lot in that receiver room. I think being able to add an elite, we saw what Brock Bowers did for the Raiders last year, even in a difficult season. I think he's a guy that even though he might not be ready for week 1 with the shoulder injury, that you just stash that away for whenever he's ready, because that's a top 10 talent that fell to you at 18. So those would be my 3.
The Tyler Booker thing to me is so interesting because for me, like the terms and how he's an alpha dog reminds me very much of the words that came along with Jaron Reed. Jaron Reed was this alpha dog coming out of Alabama. There's part of me with Tyler Booker where I see the Alabama jersey and I go, are we getting James Carpenter 2.0? But I hope we're not. Right. That's the only little PTSD for me. But
they say don't scout the helmet.
Right? No, I know, but it's just that kind of thing. But the more I've watched Tyler Booker, the more I saw him perform today, I just go, please somehow find a way to fit him into your zone scheme, Clint Kubiak, because if he's sitting there, take that man.
Yeah. So just to build off that, because you touched on it earlier, well, he was one of your guys at 18. Howard asks, what are your guys' thoughts on Nick Emenawari, and are you guys fine with the 18th pick? You may have noticed my reaction to when Bryce said that. If they take a safety at 18, they darn well better have had the greatest offseason that any general manager has ever had and taken care of all of their needs with what this team needs. And with the fact that this offseason, they've talked about it incessantly, they need to put their money where their mouth is. They have to shift the resources on this roster to the trenches. They have to get stronger on both sides of the ball, up front, on defense and offense. To me, safety at 18 seems like a luxury pick, even though his 2 biggest pro comps are Cam Chancellor, Seahawk legend, and Kyle Hamilton, who Mike McDonald had such great success with in Baltimore. He's a very similar player, guy that can play close to the line of scrimmage. That would I would go to bed that night pissed off. And then they'd have to do some real moving and shaking on days 2 and 3 to appease me. But that one just wouldn't make a sense to me. Although, like I said, a lot can happen between now and the end of April, right?
So I'm going to gauge how pissed off you'd be, Dan, in 2 scenarios. Seattle Seahawks take Nick Emenawari at 18, or the Seattle Seahawks take Jaxon Dart at 18.
Dart makes more sense because quarterback's it's a whole different discussion. Even if you they're hard to find. And when you think you have one, you got to take them. So
yeah,
me,
I think Evan Worry definitely is a luxury pick. I love his skill set for what he could be. And this was a dream scenario. My dream scenario is John Schneider's gone out and got Drew Dahlman, and he's got Tevin Jenkins. He's built the O line, and we're set to go. And then they can go and spend that pick on Nick Evan Worry.
Yeah. Some thoughts from you guys. Oh, this is funny. Jason James says, "Did you guys not notice the cones they had to put out because all the dumb receivers running the wrong routes? They didn't help the QBs." Yeah. You're right, and it was the first session of out routes to the left, and so some of the quarterbacks struggled early, and then by the time they flipped it over to the right, and Kurt Warner, I think, was the one that pointed it out. He's like, they have no point of reference. He even said the quarterbacks are throwing to a spot that the receivers aren't going to. Yep. Because the receivers were getting it wrong. They didn't have that point of reference. So they finally put the cone out there, and then suddenly the quarterbacks were throwing the football better, right?
To me, it just comes back to, again, fundamentals that are coached or not coached as well as they should be anymore. And that's something I think that comes out. Like, you should be able to say to a receiver, hey, you're running a bang 8 route, or a 6 is there's a route tree, run off the route tree. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. You're not running specialized concepts in the scouting combine. You're running basic things you've probably run since high school. So it shouldn't be that hard that, like Jason said, you have to put out freaking cones because you guys are too dumb to figure it out.
Yeah. So MWM, you kind of touched on this, but Shuck could fit with the Cowboys or Dolphins because both those players are, he says, their days are numbered. They could be on a little shakier ground. They've also both had significant injury histories.
Yep.
This is interesting. Bill Anderson says, I like the combo of Ratledge and Wilson for offensive line. I heard someone talking about this. I think it was day one in the combine, and it might have been in relative to defensive line combinations. I think it was Jeremiah said it. I wonder if a team would consider taking guys that have played together because you have that kind of continuity. And the entire Georgia offensive line pretty much was there. Right, you have Jared Wilson's their center, and then Tate Ratledge is the right guard, and then they even have now I'm blanking on the kid, the left guard, who also Fairchild, yeah. Like if you're a team that's desperate for interior offensive line improvement, then when it comes to all the things that we talk about how continuity is more important to the offensive line position than any other on the roster because they have to learn how to feed off each other and how to work off each other's blocks and stunts and twists and pick things up. Well, then why not draft guys that have played together for 3 years? Right. And they're good players.
No, and that's the thing. The more continuity you can build on an O-line, the better. And that's, one thing when we had Peter Blake over on our show on the Hawks Zone Rundown, I know he's been on yours too, down. The one thing he said about O-line is it's not necessarily the best talent. It's the best 5 that play together. So if you're taking guys that know how to play together already and have played together for 4 or 5 years, and you're just asking them to then adjust to 1 or 2 guys, it's a lot easier to be done than it is to say, hey, we're going to plug it, we got, like, if you're looking at Seattle, Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, cool. We're going to get 3 or however many new rotating pieces, or Abe Lucas doesn't make it. And now all of a sudden you got 4 new rotating. Like, it's hard. You have to build continuity on the O-line. Just like quarterbacks build timing with the receivers, O-line have to build timing with each other on how to deal with the stunts and the different pressures they're going to see.
And the way that they're kind of slotted right now on big boards, you could, if Jared Wilson is the number 1 center in this class, and then he went out and showed elite athleticism, which, centers don't typically go at 18, but the better ones do. We've seen it in recent years, or maybe you trade down and get it. You could, what if you got a Jared Wilson late first round, then you turn around and get Tate Ratledge in the second round? There you go. Just fixed our interior offensive line. You plug Christian Haynes at the other guard. He was their 3rd round pick a year ago, and off you go, right?
The thing that'll be interesting to me with Tate Ratledge is I think there is more of his floor is so much lower in some respects. I think he's going to be a 3rd round guy at best, more than a 2nd round guy.
You're just not a fan of the mullet, right?
Actually, I don't mind the mullet. I like that bit of swagger to him. No, it's just I just see things in his game where I go, if he doesn't pan out, round 2 is going to be a hefty price to pay for a guy that maybe like if he has per se the Christian Haynes effect, right? And say Christian Haynes in Seattle doesn't get back on track, third round, okay, that's a little bit easier to swallow. But if you're saying second round, you're still looking at a guy that should be able to start on your team.
God dang it. Note to self: whenever you go look at a player's prospect profile and all of their testing numbers on NFL.com, it immediately starts playing their combine tape with audio. So that's what you heard in the background. My apologies for that. My apologies for that. NFL.com needs to fix that. Anything else? Like any final thoughts on what you see? Let me ask you this then for a final question. So the I was going to say the knock, but the sort of the character of this draft class has been summed up over the last couple of months by those who cover it full-time, professionally, the big names, the small names, all the creators that, lacking in blue chip talent at the top, but really level talent from say 20 to 60. We've heard a lot of that this week. From 20 to 60, it's basically the same player spread across a bunch of different position groups. I've even heard through the top 100, really, really level talent ability. So teams looking to improve themselves in any particular position group can find what they want in this draft. Anything that happened over the last 4 days change your opinion about the class as a whole?
Not really. The biggest thing I'd say for me is I think this may be the draft that kickstarts a change in the NFL from the pass happy league it's been back to a run first NFL, building their games more into getting running backs involved. And I may think you see a spike in free agency for running backs in years to come, because I think this class of running backs, the fact you're going to be able to get starter level guys on potentially even day 3 that can come in and start for you for significant carries, I think is just going to change the NFL landscape. It's a cyclical cycle that the NFL goes through. You go through, teams have now gone too high with take away the deep shots, and the team that won the Super Bowl ran the ball so effectively.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see this kind of change. And the other thing I will say, if you look at a lot of these programs now in the college level, are hiring more and more people that have come from an NFL background and are building NFL style programs. North Carolina, Washington, Oklahoma just hired Jim Nagy. You're starting to see that become the thing, is how are we getting guys more ready for the NFL earlier? And I think it'll be interesting to see coming forward in the next few years, players from those type of schools that go to this more NFL-based philosophy to get pro developed, how much that changes the NFL landscape.
It's a fascinating answer. And I think it's also interesting because, it's a cyclical league, right? So if the pendulum swings back to offenses being more physical and running the football more effectively, then also another strength of this draft is 310, 320 plus pound defensive linemen too. And so the pendulum might not take as long as it usually does to swing back the other way. I guess my overall take on this draft class after going to the Senior Bowl, watching the combine, is I think this year more than any we've seen up until this point, because of the combination of NIL and guys staying in school to work on their craft, making a little bit of money before they make the leap, and also some of the extra COVID years, I think more players out of this draft are going to become Pro Bowlers and all pros than maybe the projections peg it as, when they talk about the lack of blue chip guys up at the top, because they've all played so much football, right? So many of the prospects in this class have 40 plus starts. And so I think maybe they haven't shown to be that sort of elite athlete that you're looking for coming into draft season. And maybe the age scares some people off, but I think it's going to make the transition easier. And some of these guys are going to translate really well. And we're going to get, I think this, when we look back on this class 3-4 years from now, people might have a different view of it from there. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Thank you for the donation. Really appreciate it. What team do you see making the biggest splash or surprise move in the draft? I've got one that just came to mind, but I'll let you start.
Team that makes the biggest splash or surprise move in the draft? Ooh, I think it's going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay.
I think the reason why I say that,
right?
I think they may trade down, actually, ironically, or they may take someone we're not expecting for the simple reason you have a new head coach. You're trying to get Trevor Lawrence weapons because you cannot keep burning his years, and he's supposedly a franchise level quarterback. You have to start doing some, and they can't sit in this rebuild phase. I think they have to try and flip this switch quick. I think they may make a surprising move that people aren't anticipating, whether that's trading out of 4 and getting a really good talent from another team to come in and make an immediate impact.
I can see the Jets selling out
Yep.
to try and get to the top of the draft. Like
I
they've
agree.
just I think their owner is just tired of it. I think he thought, that I think he thought he got the best young head coach on the market when they got Robert Saleh at the time. And then they went out and sold out and sold their soul to Aaron Rodgers and let him bring the whole band in with him. And he thought they were going to challenge for championships because the defense was in place. And now I'm adding a Hall of Fame quarterback and he's bringing all of his boys with him. And it was such an unmitigated disaster. I think he's tired of it all. And, there's reports today that the Jets really like Justin Fields. Well, that's not an answer. That's a stopgap.
No. Yep.
And I think when you look at their roster, you can make the case that they can afford to give up some draft capital to go up potentially all the way to number 1 if they need to get a quarterback. They've got
Agreed.
a couple extra picks. They have an extra 5th. They have all of their other assortment of picks. So they have 8 total. They have 3 in the top 92. I see them as a team that's at least going to try everything they can to move up to the top of this draft and make a splash.
I would agree with you because the other factor is if they have conviction about a quarterback this year, then next year's quarterback class doesn't necessarily play as much as a factor for them. So they may be willing to part with a pick next year.
Yeah, and that's a risky proposition because the quarterback class next year looks better, right? But if you're trying to win, and he's probably I think Woody's just so tired of rebuilding that he doesn't want to hear that talk. I don't think he wants to hear, but Garrett Nussmeier, but maybe Arch comes out after 1 year, but maybe Drew Aller. Like, I don't think he wants to hear that. He's like, go get me a guy right now. Get me Cam Ward because Cam Ward can play. That arm works late in the season, terrible weather, having to throw the ball, in bad conditions like we've seen Josh Allen do in Buffalo. Like that. And I think his personality, I think it works. And it doesn't come with all the baggage that Sanders does. I think they're going to give that a shot.
No, I agree. And just Jordan Schultz, considering him and Ian Rappaport have their beef, I might as well say his name right because I don't want to run into that guy in a Starbucks. Just broke that the Titans will host both Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward this week in their facility. So back to back, they'll have them in.
Yeah. Teams are doing that more. I think the Commanders did that last year. They brought Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and those guys all in at the same time. Just kind of interesting.
One thing we didn't touch on that'll be an interesting story to watch going forward for our listeners is what happens with Abdul Carter and his injury.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like he's going to forego surgery.
Yep.
Because he thinks he'll be able to get to his pro day and that it can heal on its own. I hope he's right. Because if you make that decision and you don't put the screw in your foot, which I think the timeline on that would be 6 weeks to get the screw out, and then you'd miss your pro day and all of that, but you'd be ready by training camp. Gosh, you go aggravate that thing and fully break it or whatever. Now you are in jeopardy of missing some time. It's a big risk on his part.
Yep. And the one O lineman for me that's going to be very intriguing, Dan, that I'm going to be paying close attention to over these next few weeks and even to where he slots will be Will Campbell. I think Will Campbell is a better prospect as a guard than he is a tackle at the next level. And I'm going to be very interested to see where that conversation goes with him because of what he performed like at the combine.
And I'll just give one more little answer to this question because I think it's a really intriguing one. I think when you have a class that the hallmark of the class is even talent, that it lends itself more to surprises and a lack of chalk and guys going like, you know, every year they grade all the mock drafts. I can't remember the name of the website now, but they always put out the rankings of who gets the most picks right. I think this is going to be a really, really tough year for anyone to have a great year pick in the first round. And because of that, I think it lends itself to guys rising and falling. And I think at the end of the day, when we get to draft time, I think there's a really good chance that Shedeur Sanders is the third quarterback taken, that somebody jumps ahead of him. Probably Jaxon Dart. That's the most likely one. But if you're a team that likes the talent, but you question all the other stuff, you're not going to have those questions about Jaxon Dart. He's going to come in and blow you away in those meetings and interviews. And if you have any hesitation about what Sanders brings outside the football field, I could see him dropping.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's going to be the other conversational piece, is where Jaxon Dart ends up on draft day.
Yep. All right, buddy. Can't really promise anyone what the next show will be. We're still kind of feeling this out and putting it all together, but just, hit that bell button when you subscribe to the channel. And then anytime we go live, we'll let you know. And then as this channel continues to grow, we'll do some other content as well outside of the live streams. But thank you to everyone for tuning in. We're at 905 viewers at the moment. And buddy, you've got some pull. 617 of them are from your Twitter feed. So
appreciate it, everyone.
You're kicking my butt on that, but thanks for bringing them in. Thanks for all that. That must be that Canadian fan base, right?
It must be something. Yeah. Something's going right.
All right, man. Anything you want to say before we go?
No. Just for me, I'm looking forward to upcoming shows with this. And, again, we do, guys, really appreciate the Seahawk questions on here, but try and focus them more draft centric. We will do draft content on our Seahawk channels at Dan Seahawks Forever. I'm over at Hawk Zone Rundown, which is now affiliated with Field Goals. So if you ever looking for our stuff, head over to Field Goals. You'll see articles posted there about the podcast that me and Ryan put out. And tomorrow we do have our live segment with Mookie Alexander. So that'll be the thing we've got going tomorrow, and we'll post the time for that later today.
Nice. And then over on Seahawks Forever, at Seahawks Forever on Twitter, and also here on YouTube, daily content through the week. And, the combine obviously kind of threw that schedule into the abyss, but check that out and go subscribe over there. And as we continue forward with this channel, we will have guests on, we'll have creators and analysts on that cover other teams, and we'll talk about each division and draft needs and all those kinds of things you can come to expect from an NFL draft channel. So with that, Bryce, we'll see you soon. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a good night.
Good night.